Hi, my name is Lisa Rubel from Love to Color My World, and I'm here with another Skill Builder video in conjunction with Sit and Sew Fabrics and their pre-cut kits. And today we're talking triangles. Now when you talk to a quilter about triangles, they usually think half square triangles or quarter square triangles, those easy ones that you make out of squares. But what about the 60-degree triangle, or to go back to middle school math, the equilateral triangle, where all three sides of the triangle are the same length and all three angles of the triangle are the same. This creates a very cool looking quilt, but it's not quite the same to put together as half square triangles. So today I'm going to use this pre-cut kit from Sit and Sew Fabrics, and if you look, all of the triangles are already cut for you. And that is a fantastic time saver. You can just start sewing right away. The kit also comes with backing fabric and binding strips so that you can finish the quilt. All you need to provide is the batting and the sewing know-how, which I'll be helping you out with. So when you've opened your kit, you have 77 triangles to work with. That'll be 7 rows of 11 triangles each. When you're putting these triangles together, you can choose if you want to be very specific about your fabric placement and maybe lay the whole quilt out on your design wall or sewing room floor, or if you want to go for a more grab and go approach. I personally like to do what I call controlled scrappy, which is along the lines of grab and grow, but I get to make choices. So I'm pulling out triangles to line up in my first row. And if I decide that I don't like one of the fabrics next to it, I will take it out and choose another one as well, and just keep going like that. So once you get your first row laid out, or your whole quilt laid out, whatever you want to do, we'll start sewing the triangles together. And I'm going to show you how we're going to position them with these first two. So we're going to lay the triangles on top of each other, right sides together, so all of the raw edges are matching. I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. First two are easy because you're just sewing 2 triangles together, and from that point on you need to make sure that you're joining the correct side of the triangles. So for adding on the 3rd triangle in the row and additional triangles, it's not quite the same because your triangle is not the same size anymore because of the seam allowance between triangles 1 and 2. So what you want to do is to line up that 3rd triangle right sides together so that our unstitched corner of triangle number 2 is aligned with the corner of triangle number 3. So you'll see up here at the top it extends over where our seam allowance is, and that's fine. So as long as you have that unstitched corner lined up and then stitch with the 1/4 inch seam allowance down that edge. And then we'll press that 3rd triangle open. And you can see that that extra fabric we had at the top, that creates our 1/4 inch seam allowance for joining the rows together, or for where the binding will go in the case of the top row. So you're going to continue adding triangles across the row in that same way. So my next one, I've got my unstitched corner up here, so that's where I would align my next triangle. And then you absolutely can pin these triangles in place. They do have stretchy bias edges, so if you do that, it will help your piecing be more accurate. Stitch down that line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you'll press that piece open as well, and just continue adding. You do want to double check with each one that you're doing it in the right spot so that you're getting a row and don't end up with something that starts to curve. What you'll also want to do is to trim off these little points that you get when you sew the triangles together, as that will help to eliminate bulk. And you can do that after each seam, because you can see there's one that hides underneath the seam. So each time, if you trim off the points before you add on your next triangle, it will make your rows go together smoothly. So you're going to make 7 rows of 11 triangles each, and then we'll take a look at joining those rows together to make the quilt top. So I have 3 partial rows pieced together. At this point you should have your full rows pieced together, but I'm using shorter ones just to make it easier to demo. And now I'm going to show you how to join those rows together. I'm going to move one out of the way. So what you want to do is lay one row right sides together on top the other and go to the first corner and nest those seams and put a pin in. Now for the middle ones, what I like to do so that I have the best chance of having all the points on my triangles is to put a pin in right where those 2 seams meet, so where the point of my triangle is, and then peek through to below and to put the pin in that same spot on the second triangle. And then I will use that spot to pin those 2 together. So when I'm sewing along, if I sew right where that pin goes into the fabric, right where those 2 seams come together, I should hit that spot on both the top row and the bottom row, giving me 2 perfect triangle points. So you'd want to do that on each of the places where you will have 2 triangles meeting. Again, mine's a little shorter, so I'm just going to align these 2 at the other end and then stitch along the row using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. These do have some stretch because of the bias cut, so if you notice, like mine, my top triangle appears to be a little bit longer than my bottom one. Because of that stretch, when they go together, I'll be able to ease those 2 together and make them fit. So if you run into that as well, don't worry about it. Okay, so I've got my first 2 rows together. Let's open it up and see how my point turned out. Pretty good, it looks like. I'm going to take this over to my ironing station. For these row seams, because of the bulk, you're going to want to press these seams open. That will just make the point where you have basically 6 triangles coming together. That will make that just a little less bulky when you go to machine quilt. So press it open from the back, then I flip it to the front and press it as well. And there you can see I've got my 2 rows joined together. So do the same thing for each of your rows till you have all 7 joined together, and that'll be your finished quilt top. And then we'll talk about how to trim off the triangles on the 2 horizontal sides so that we can make your finished quilt square. So once you have your entire quilt top pieced, our last step is to trim off the extra triangles on the side. And the way to do that is to spread your quilt out on a large cutting surface, and you'll probably have to move the quilt a couple times. But set up your ruler so that the edge of the ruler is lined up with where your triangle points are. And then I like to double check by looking at the horizontal lines on the ruler to make sure they're aligned with my seams. And that way I know that I don't have something, you know, that's super wonky and won't give me a finished quilt edge that is nice and straight. So once you have that set up, go ahead with your ruler and cut down the way. And what you'll need to do then is to slide your quilt up. And again, remember, I just have a smaller piece, but what I like to do is to slide it up so that I still have some of my cut quilt touching the ruler, because that way I can use that as another safety check, another safeguard, just to make sure that my line is staying straight. So I'm looking at the line I've already cut, I'm looking at the triangle points that I'm lining up with, and at the horizontal lines on the ruler, how they align with the seam. And that will help me get the straightest possible edge. So if you do that on both sides of your quilt top, then you'll be done with that. You can baste together your backing fabric, batting, and quilt top, quilt the quilt however you would like, and then use the included binding to finish your quilt up. I hope that you enjoyed our triangle adventure today and have realized that sewing equilateral triangles together is not that tricky. You just need to know how to do it.